These are the good old days. Mavericks, Stars, conference finals. It don't get no better than that. Let me tell you something. We got on our hotline, on our D&M leasing hotline, the digital content manager of your Dallas Mavericks, DallasMavs.com, my buddy, Bobby Karalla. How you doing, Bobby?
Chris, I'm doing well today, man. I'm doing really well. Not a single dang complaint in the whole wide world.
Have you had any sleep? Jake and I have had very little sleep. We could not have any alcohol because we had a morning show to do, but I know you've had no sleep, have you?
Oh, no, man. No, I haven't had sleep in like a month and a half, but you know what? The boys are making sure that it's worth it.
It is definitely worth it. By the way, before we get into the X's and O's of last night, and Jake's got a million questions for you, have you heard anything new about Dereck Lively II and his strained neck? Because everybody's concerned about his situation and his status.
No, there's no news yet. I'm sure that there will be a little more word later today, but on the one hand, obviously it's a neck injury, and so you want to be as careful with that as you possibly can. But on the other, it's the playoffs, and so just like with Maxi Kleber, who I know has been reevaluated at some point because it's been more than 3 weeks since his shoulder injury, there's just really no reason for the Mavs to tip their hand at any point. So I suppose basically if you hear someone say that Lively is out or that Maxi is out, then that's pretty definitive. But otherwise, it just kind of behooves the Mavs to say, he's questionable, and then leave the Wolves guessing. You don't want to tip your hand at all. You don't want to give out any more information than you need. So, I would say in cases like this, no news is good news.
Bobby, Jake Reitma with you here. Appreciate you being on, man. And just as the Mavs kind of play this one forward, you kind of have two different mindsets with Lively in the lineup or without. Let's say game 4, hypothetically, they prepare to play without Lively. What type of impact does that have leaving for Gafford? I mean, he was great last night. Can he continue to sustain that level of play in your mind?
He's going to have to. If Lively doesn't play, basically what the Wolves did for the majority of game 3 is just double team and blitz Luka all the time, off every screen and roll. And they were doing it very aggressively, like pushing Luka almost all the way out to midcourt. Now, somehow that dude still ended up with 33 points despite that, which is just unbelievable. But if the Wolves are going to commit to defending Luka like that, maybe even if they're going to dial up the pressure on Kyrie a little more, Gafford is going to have to make a lot of plays in the short roll, whether it's attacking the basket himself or looking to pass, swing the ball, keep the offense moving. And that's one aspect of Lively's game that, as a rookie, has just really impressed me. And I know, a lot of fans are very impressed with his ability to just read the floor, make these passes, keep the offense moving in those situations. Gafford, that's not necessarily his strong suit compared to Lively. He's a much better finisher around the rim, active on the glass and all that. So, if Lively's out, then Gafford and potentially Dwight Powell, I don't know about maybe even Markieff Morris, or if they go small with P.J. Washington at the 5, those guys are going to need to be prepared to make a lot more plays because, I think after the Wolves saw what Luka and Kyrie did to them last night, I'm just not sure that they can, single cover those guys again and dare them to score 66 combined because Luka and Kyrie are going to do that if they leave them one-on-one.
We're talking with Mavs.com digital content director Bobby Karalla. This is 105.3 The Fan. And Bobby, you and I were talking before the game in the pregame show we do to the crowd in the arena about how different role players are going to have to step up. And I thought arguably the biggest shot in the game was P.J. Washington's corner 3. I thought Luka had the dagger with the lob to Daniel Gafford, but that corner 3. Can you talk about what P.J. Washington was doing low key through the whole game until he hit that big 3?
Yeah, I mean, through 2 games, P.J. Washington and Derrick Jones Jr. had combined to take only 17 threes total. In the OKC series, they were combining to take like 14 or 15 of those per game, and almost all of them were wide open corner 3s because the Thunder were putting a lot of high pressure, especially on Kyrie, but also Luka to an extent as well. The Wolves, meanwhile, through those first 2 games, they were kind of hugging those corner shooters, and to their detriment. I mean, there was a lot of dunks. There's a lot of space underneath the screens that Gafford and Lively were diving into. And so I think after game 2, Chris Finch was like, enough is enough. Let's take away those dunks. But that you got to give up something in the NBA. The court is just too big and teams space the floor too well. And so from the opening tip, I think the first basket of the game, for the Mavs was a PJ Washington 3, and the next one was a Jones 3. Like, those guys were getting touches in their comfort zone very early on. And you saw, I mean, it manifested in Jones had, 9 or 10 points. PJ Washington had 16 points. That's the most they've had in any game this series. And, a lot of it was just wide open jumpers. So if the Wolves are going to allow that, you have to knock those shots down, because if those guys miss, let's say Washington starts 0 for 4 and Dereck Jones is like 1 for 3 or 1 for 4, then the Wolves are just going to keep leaving them open. And then all of a sudden Luka and Kyrie's job becomes tougher. The rollman's job becomes tougher. The offense can get gummy. It can bog down. And then the next thing you know, you can lose a game. So if the Wolves are going to leave those guys open, they have to be prepared to knock those shots down. And obviously, a huge reason why they won the game was not only because of that late 3 that PJ hit, but also because of all the other 3s that they were hitting throughout the game.
Bobby Karalla of Mavs.com with us on the DMD leasing hotline. Bobby, I want to flip it over to the Minnesota side of things. Obviously, the struggles of Karl-Anthony Towns have been well documented, and another tough night shooting for him last night. And, he said some things post-game that maybe if you're a Minnesota Timberwolves fan might rub you the wrong way type of thing. But let's talk about it from a Mavs perspective. What have they done defensively on him so well that is attributed to his struggles in this series?
I want to give credit where it's due, but it does feel like Towns is just missing a lot of shots. He's gotten away from the defense, and the defense has lost him a couple times. Not many times. It's not like they're just leaving him wide open or anything, but in the chances he's had, like the super clean looks, he just has not been able to knock enough of them down, and that's obviously been a huge determining factor in this series so far. But PJ Washington has tried to get up in him, and sometimes that has meant that Towns is able to floor it and, get past him because PJ is out just a little too far. But, otherwise it's just made it tough. He hasn't had a lot of clean looks, I guess I should say. He's missed almost all the clean looks he's gotten. Like, I think last night he was like 0 for 8 or 0 for 9 from 3, which is just unheard of. He's like a career, 40-something% three-point shooter. But, I guess the good defense was once defined to me as not necessarily the shots that you do allow, but the shots that you don't allow. And I guess through 3 games, the fact that you could probably count on 1 or 2 hands the number of just super clean, like as soon as the guy's rising to shoot it, you're like, oh man, that's definitely going in. Like Towns has maybe only had like 5 or 6 of those shots through 3 games. And that, whenever you're a guy that's kind of struggling and you would just trade your kingdom for a clean look and you just can't get one, I guess that's been a big deal, and they have to keep guarding him. They have to keep staying home on him and taking those shots away no matter what he's shooting, because if he gets going, he can score 30 points in like 7 minutes just from getting hot from. He's that good. We saw Naz Reid basically do that in game 2. Towns is that level of shooter. And so, if you're the Mavs, hey, job's not finished on Towns yet, job's not finished on Naz Reid, you got to keep bringing the intensity, because if those guys heat up, it could spell doom for your defense.
I personally think, and this is my theory alone, that Dirk in the building is his kryptonite. Karl-Anthony Towns cannot make threes when the greatest big man shooter of all time is staring him down from front row.
Well, we need MFFLs to fundraise and get Dirk another ticket to Game 4.
Exactly. Make that happen. There is a guy, though, did step up for the Minnesota Timberwolves. That'd be Anthony Edwards. He had a Jordan-like dunk, but he also stepped up by going I think he was 11 out of 24. He had 26 points, 9 rebounds, 9 assists, just showed a triple-double. He showed up, but I don't think he's enough to carry him. And, again, we know Minnesota's not going to go away. I personally think without Dereck Lively, we don't know if he's going to play or not. It's going to be real hard to sweep this team, even though they are vulnerable and the Dallas Mavericks are on fire. What do you think?
Yeah, in the second half, the Wolves were getting to the rim a little too much. The perimeter defense was a little shaky, and now normally you can count on Gafford and Lively back there to protect the rim, but for a long stretch in that second half, Minnesota was going with Towns and Reed in the front court. Gobert was on the bench, and so they were spacing the floor, and that just makes rotation and help, especially at the rim, a lot tougher. And in the minutes when Dwight Powell was out there, or at one point the Mavs went to PJ Washington at the 5, they were playing super small. Mm-hmm. There was just not enough size and length around the rim. Ant had that nasty dunk, and that was on Gafford, actually. It looked like Gafford got a little bit of a late read on the play, or maybe Ant just took off sooner than he thought or something. But it was just a little too easy, and so – and, this Mavs defense has been really, really, really good for like 2.5 months now. But one area they've really struggled in is against teams that can space the floor with 5 good shooters. And the Wolves can do that with Conley and McDaniels and then 2 big guys. So the Mavs still have to clean some stuff up. They've had Gafford and Lively back there to kind of bail them out in times where they make a mistake or they get blown by or whatever. But if you're not going to have Lively back there, then everyone else needs to step up their game too. And I guess it remains to be seen, in Game 4, is Minnesota going to come out and say, hey, why not us? Why can't we be the first one? Or are they going to be a little nervous and maybe the game will be there for the taking? I mean, we'll find that out from the tip, but the Mavs have to plan for a desperate Wolves team, and they found something offensively in the second half, and so the Mavs have to be able to sniff that out and put a stop to it.
Absolutely. Bobby Karalla of Mavs.com with us on the DMM Leasing Hotline. Bobby, we've talked about some role players, and I think we would be remiss if we didn't, and I don't even know how to form this into a question for you, but talk about the greatness of Kyrie and Luka. They combined for 66 again last night.
Clutch.
In your mind, what do you compare this type of run that they're on to, and are we in fact witnessing perhaps the best backcourt of all time?
Man, I mean, they're amazing. They're amazing. I literally don't know what else to say. I think we agree that Kyrie and Luka, they're good. They're pretty dang good. Last night, they combined for 21 in the fourth quarter. The Wolves, as a team, scored 20. So, they just outscored them. In Game 1, Luka had 15 in the fourth quarter. In Game 2, I think Kyrie had 12 or 13. And then, again, last night, they combined for 21. I mean, they are 2 of the, if not the 2 best closers in the NBA. They're 2 of the best closers we've ever seen. I guess the closest thing that I can compare this to is basically if you took Dirk and cloned him. The Mavs have 2 Dirks out there. That's literally it. 2 guys that can create their shot from anywhere on the floor that have basically solved offense. You can't double team them because they'll make the right pass.
Mm-hmm.
You can't drop because they'll step into the shot. You can't blitz because they'll just dribble around you. You can't switch because they'll hunt the mismatch. There's nothing they cannot do.
Yeah, they got huge IQs. They're just basketball IQs is off the charts. And you just mentioned about all the different ways they can beat you. There have been some comps up there. We even had a Tolo text in and say, well, hey, what about the Splash Brothers, Steph and Clay? Clay doesn't create his own shot. He's a catch and shoot guy. And don't get me wrong, Steph is generational. But you've got 2 guys like Luka and Kyrie in their prime. Well, Luka just getting into his prime. This is just some sick stuff to deal with.
Yeah, and one big difference between Steph and Clay and Luka and Kyrie is that Luka and Kyrie are not only tasked with giving the Mavs 60 points, sometimes more. Last night it was 66, but they're also tasked with basically making every single pass too.
Yeah,
I mean they carry such an unprecedented offensive load, and that's not a good or a bad thing. That's just how the team is built. That's how they run their offense. But one of these 2 guys, sometimes both of them, have to make almost every single offensive decision on every single possession, every single game. They are doing it all for the Mavs. Now, the role players are stepping up, make no mistake. I mean, they're not here without PJ, Jones, Gafford, all that. But those guys do so much every single time down the floor, and yet they still have the juice to buy in on defense. They're both defending at a higher level than I've ever seen them play. They're both finishing games in the fourth quarter. Ant, to your point, last night, had a huge third quarter. In the fourth quarter, until a last-second layup whenever the game was already decided, he only took 2 shots in the fourth quarter. Luka and Kyrie scored 21 points. Woo! I mean, there's levels to this, and those guys are just showing that, it's not how you start, it's how you finish. The fourth quarter is where your money is made, and the Mavs in this series have trailed inside the final 5 minutes of all 3 games, and yet they have won all 3 games because they have the 2 best fourth quarter players in the NBA. And until they lose a close game, we can pretty confidently say that.
Bottom line, they are getting it done. They know how to close out these games. And it's an amazing thing when you think about how great offensively those 2 guys are. And yet this is the #1 defense in the NBA since the first week in March. It's unbelievable about how the different ways they can win and beat you. And the coaching staff are just pushing all the right buttons. Jay Kidd's coaching his ass off.
Yeah, I mean, basically, your offense can have 2 premier superstars, but it's only going to be as good as the role players allow it to be. Those guys are all stepping up. Likewise, you can have as many big, badass dudes on defense, but it's only going to be as good as your weakest links allow it to be. and Luka and Kyrie are the guys that teams target, but those two guys have not allowed like a single easy basket this whole playoffs. Like, they're buying in. Everybody's buying in. Everybody is elevating their game. And you have to credit the players for that, but you also have to credit J-Kidd and the coaching staff for, creating the culture that would make these guys want to buy in. It's really easy to say, hey, if you just try super hard, we can win the championship. But it's another thing to get that message across and see that play itself out on the floor. And everything right now is working. I don't want to jinx it. I don't want to spoil it. I don't want to do anything to ruin it or whatever. But, vibes are at an all-time high. Buy-in is at an all-time high. Our sleep is at an all-time low. But like I said, man, it's worth it.
Hey, you made it go full circle, Bobby. We can't thank you enough for joining us. Bobby Karalla of DallasMavs.com. Bobby, I'll see you tomorrow night.
All right, I'll see you then.